An absolute belter of a guest this week, Northern Ireland manager Michael O'Neill. Michael, I know you think this is an interview, but I've actually been sent for Alan McRae for one last war cry. Come on, big man, fancy it?
Oh no, that ship sailed, I think, isn't it?
Right, on to yourself, Michael. A bit about your career. Grew up playing football in Northern Ireland. What kind of upbringing was that football-wise?
It's good upbringing, you know. I played from very young age through school systems and through international age groups and stuff, and I played for an Irish league club called Coleraine, which is where I started. I didn't go down the traditional route of football where you know, an apprenticeship and that type of thing. I actually used to go to Man City as a schoolboy with Neil Lennon, right, and Jerry Taggart and Michael Hughes. We would travel across on the boat and spend some time at Man City. But in the end up, I stayed in school, and then down the line I was transferred. So my background was really in Irish league football, and then I came across to English football when I was 18.
Who would your heroes have been back in the day? Was it George Best?
No, George was really before my time, to be fair.
I thought you were older.
No, definitely not before my time. But heroes, God. Well, I was a huge Liverpool fan, so Kenny Dalglish was my absolute idol, so he was. And I was fortunate enough to grow up in an era when, you know, that great Liverpool team of, you know, the 70s and the 80s, brilliant, you know, won everything, European Cups. So Dalglish was very much my idol. So any time at Anfield I've had the pleasure to meet him, and it's been a big highlight for me still. Brilliant.
Obviously you mentioned Coleraine there. See, being at a smaller club, was there a freedom for you to just go and play?
I think you go in at a very young age. You know, I think that, you know, we're trying to develop pathways for players now. When I played, there wasn't, you know, a pathway. You just, you know, I played with men since about the age of 15, 16. I played in the first team. You know, I think I played in Europe in a European game when I was 16 for Coleraine. So that wasn't, you know, designed. That was just what happened. And I think, you know, it equips you better sometimes than this perfect pathway that we're always trying to create for players. And, you know, then we get disappointed with it, and then we start to look at the, you know, percentage rates of players that aren't coming through. So yeah, I just think it was, you know, as a young player, you know, I had pace, and I was a wide player. Sometimes I played through the middle. You just played off your instinct a lot. There wasn't a lot of coaching at that point in time, and it probably benefited me, to be honest.
Obviously, making your debut at 15, were you hotly tipped in Northern Ireland as the next big thing?
Yeah, I had a lot, you know, more so probably about 2 years later, and I came through, and I was, I actually played here for Coleraine against Dundee United in UEFA Cup game, and it was the United team that had just been beaten the previous season in the UEFA Cup final. So, and I played very well that night, and there was a lot of interest after me. Jim McLean actually tried to sign me after the game as well, but I opted for Newcastle. So there was a lot of interest, and there was a bit of expectation. But the game then didn't have the media outlets that it has now. You know, I wouldn't be interviewed by people like you at this stage at that stage in my career.
Which is definitely a good thing.
It's another highlight.
See, being 15 though, were you given leeway by the older players and managers, or were they just as tough?
No, they were tough. They were tough. You know, I mean, the environment for a young player was tough. It was tough in Northern Ireland. Very little protection as well. You had to learn to, you know, avoid tackles and stay out of that because you didn't have the physique to deal with it. And then when I came into football, you know, and you know, we were talking about it earlier. You know, how coaching and how the mentality of coaches was then as opposed to how it is now, and how you have to be with players. So no, it was a tough environment, but it was great days. You know, I always look back at, you know, where I started at Newcastle, and then, you know, to Dundee United and the Hibs, and, you know, the people that I played under, and, you know, there was tough times in that period of my career. But overall, you know, I look back and, you know, I think it shaped me as a player, and certainly it shaped me as a manager.
You mentioned that you went to Newcastle in 1987. Mm-hmm. Willie McFaulds.
Yeah, Willie McFaulds
was the fact that he was Irish as well, did that have a part to play in it?
It did a little bit. You know, I remember I came over with the manager from Coleraine, and we went to Tannadice and met with Jim McLean, and he actually offered me the dreaded 4-year contract with a 4-year option, and I kind of agreed that I was going to go, and then we decided, we knew we were going to meet Newcastle. Dundee United didn't know that we were going to meet Newcastle, so we said, look, 48 hours, and then I went and met Newcastle, and I just had a better feeling that this was the right thing. So, you know, I think my dad felt the wrath of Jim McLean when he phoned up and told him that I was going to Newcastle instead. But it just seemed like the right thing. It was a massive club. It was struggling a little bit in what was the old First Division, which today's Premier League, but you could see the potential in the club, and as I say, you know, I went there and I had a great first season as well.
How daunting was it moving over from Northern Ireland to a big city like Newcastle?
Very daunting, because I was at school still. I wasn't even out like in a, you know, it wasn't like I was a professional player. I was a part-time player, and I was still at school. I was studying for my A-levels at the time, and then suddenly, you know, I'm in a dressing room with Paul Gascoigne. Darren Jackson was a young player there at the time. Glenn Roeder, we had a Brazilian, Mirandinha. So you learn to grow up quick, and I came from a town, Ballymena, actually a town that Brendan Rodgers lives quite close to, grew up quite close to Ballymena as well. And suddenly you're in a big city in England like Newcastle. So, but again, you know, that's all part of it. You know, it's part of becoming a footballer, is how you adapt to life, and when you move away from home and you have to deal with a lot of things. But you know, as I say, it was tough at times. But you know, when I look back, my memories are more good than bad.
So you mentioned all the young players that you went and joined there. How would you go together in Newcastle, the nightlife?
Oh, we had a good time. And at the time I was 18, so to say I would have been a little bit naive would have been an understatement, you know. So yeah, we used to go to the big market with Gaza and that after games.
They've been quiet.
Yeah, so we had some good nights. But again, you know, the culture of football was different then. It was different, you know. The social aspect of it was different as well. And there was nothing better than, you know, playing for Newcastle, winning, and having that feeling of, you know, having the night out and everything after. And as I say, it was a great club to play for.
I always ask everyone this. Do you remember your debut for Newcastle?
I do indeed, yeah. 2-1, beat Charlton. Didn't have the best game, to be fair. I always remember Gaza was playing. Gaza used to always want to play off the front player, like play little balls around the corner and that. At that time, I was always like wanting to run in behind. So he'd be playing around balls around the corner, I would run in behind, and then the centre half would just step in and take the ball. And he was just going off his head. The whole 90 minutes, he was just going off his head with me. And I remember he came in on the Monday morning, and he apologised to me. He says, "Listen, I was out of order. I shouldn't have spoke to you like that." And it was a big thing for me, because he was the big player. You know, he was 20 at the time. A lot of pressure on him as well. And you know, it was the start of me. You know, it was about 3 weeks after I had arrived. I think I made my debut, and it was a tough curve to learn. You know, the St James's, you know, the Gallagher's a tough audience to play in front of. But I remember it well, and I remember, you know, those early days and having to adapt to players of that level. And you know, you're always seeking approval as a player. You always want it. When you come into the team, you want approval from the older players. And, you know, so it was good of him to come to me on the Monday and apologise for how he'd been with me, and then give me that confidence boost to go on and obviously establish myself in the first team.
Any particular wind-ups you remember for Gaza?
God, too many to remember. Like, I always remember when we were on away trips, they used to knock on my door, and then I'd come out in the corridor and there'd be no one there, and then I'd come again and they'd knock the door again, I'd go out again, and then about 4 of them would pile up and they'd just come in and press me up against the wall and put the bed up on top of me and wreck my room and stuff like that there. So as a young boy, you were the brunt of many I suppose tricks and whatever, but as I say, it's all part of the growing up process.
You said obviously at first you were a bit nervous and no moving in the right places for the ball. How long did it take you to finally feel, yeah, I'm one of the players here now?
I think you start to feel it after, like, possibly, you know, you get to that point where you've played maybe 20, 25 games. You never can fully settle on it, because the game's constantly changing. New players are coming in, you're adapting. You know, at Newcastle, in my first season, you know, we finished 7th, which was the highest Newcastle had finished for a long time. You know, I'd finished, I think, 13 goals. I scored, it was the top goal scorer. And then the next season, by October, Willie McFall was sacked. There's a new manager comes in, new players started to come. Gaza had left to go to Tottenham. There's so many things that are, you know, it's one thing about football. It's so transient. It moves so quickly that you can't. The one thing you can't do is just feel that. But I always, you know, that you've made it. I always felt that, like, I got to that point. I was an international player. That, you know, I'd sort of established myself. But again, you know, I had to every time I moved club, I always felt that I had to redo that again.
When you were on fire at Newcastle, you mentioned you were top scorer there. Was there other clubs that were interested in you then? Yeah,
there was interest at the time, because Newcastle were a selling club, you know, and there'd been a bit of talk at the time. You know, at the time Liverpool were the big club, and like the champions, obviously the other big clubs were really like Manchester United. Everyone thought Gascoigne was going to go to Manchester United. It was a little bit of a surprise when he went to Tottenham. The game we played Tottenham, and I always remember Terry Venables was just back from Barcelona, took the Tottenham job. He was all suntan in the dugout, and Gaza scored 2 that day. It was a January day. We beat Tottenham 2-0. was brilliant that day, and I think Venables made his mind up that day to go and to sign him. So there was interest, but the second season was difficult for me. I had injuries. Newcastle got relegated, and the interest sort of waned a little bit as well. And at that point, I ended up coming to Scotland, and I don't regret that. It was at the time I felt it was the right move for my career, but it showed me, I think very quickly, within the space of possibly 2.5 years within the game, I'd seen both sides of the game very quickly.
I was going to say, how hard is that for a young kid moving away from home? Want your first year so high and then the next year so low?
It's very difficult. It was very difficult because the change of manager was difficult at Newcastle. Jim Smith was an older manager. He didn't really have any interest in developing players. Like, he brought Mark McGee down at the time from Celtic to play. He brought Mickey Quinn in to play. He didn't really want to be like, right, I'm going to develop this 18, 19-year-old Northern Ireland boy. And I did feel a little bit on the periphery of it, a little bit on the outside, whereas under Willie McFall I had felt an integral part of things. And that is the nature of football, unfortunately, and it does test you. The mental side of the game tests you a lot. And at the end of just over 2 seasons at Newcastle, then obviously I came north to Dundee United.
And what appealed to you about Dundee United? Obviously it wasn't me, Jim, because he went off his nut at your dad.
I think the one thing that appealed to me about Dundee United was, I'd heard so much about Dundee United that the players were so well coached, and I felt that I needed to be coached, to be honest. I felt that, if I was going to develop as a player, I needed to benefit from that. I needed to be in that environment. The environment I was in at Newcastle didn't provide that for me. And I just had that feeling, I don't know, I think it was an instinctive thing, an instinctive decision that I made, that I would come to Dundee United, I'd become a better player, and then I'd do well, and then I'd be sold back to England or whatever. But as it happened, it didn't really work like that. I spent 4 seasons at Dundee United, and then I moved to Hibs, and then eventually I went back to England after that.
Did Jim say that when he signed you? I'll make you a better player.
Yeah, he always had that. It was one of his things that he was very good in that situation, and he had the reputation to be able to back that up. He also had he played young players. Like when I was there, I remember walking in and signing at Dundee United and seeing, like, Duncan Ferguson at the time was working with a groundsman. Andy McLaren was painting the gym for things they'd done. Crimes against Jim McLean. And they had, but the talent that was at that club was extremely high, and he played them. There wasn't, and I suppose that was another factor in my decision as well. And United were a good side. They'd competed at the top end of the Scottish Premier League. They were in cup finals. They would be in the UEFA Cup final. But as I say, it was a tough environment there as well.
How big of characters were they? Andy McLaren, Duncan Ferguson, and Billy McKinlay was there at the time as well.
Yeah, well, they were all great lads, and it's funny that I think there's always a common bond between all those lads that were United at the time, because one thing about McLean, he treated us all badly. So the fact that he treated us all badly, we have that common sort of bond, I think. And I think they were young lads, so I saw them first of all when they weren't in the team, and then I saw them come through. The likes of Big Dunk come in and eventually go to Rangers for 4 million. Andy McLaren come in, John O'Neill. Billy was in the team already established, and Billy had, he was a Scotland under-21 international, and then he made it through into the full squad. Christian Daly coming in and playing the first team at 16. So it was a really good environment, because it was a very competitive environment. They almost created that. They trained you hard and they coached you hard, but they put a lot of, they give you a lot, United. I always look at, when I go back, that's 1990. I remember going in, we would have had, guidance on nutrition. We would have had strength and conditioning coaches. We had sprint coaches. We didn't have that in Newcastle.
Before his time, was he, Jim?
We didn't have any of that. And next thing, we had psychologists, and there was a lot of stuff done at Dundee United that was way ahead of its time, to be honest. Away from, and it was the right environment possibly to do it in, because there were so many young players, and it was the right time to get players at that age and expose them to that. The problem was that how Jim managed us at times meant that possibly we didn't do as well as what we could have done.
You talked about the younger guys, but I just want to know, how good were guys like Neri, Hegarty and Sturrock?
They were brilliant. Like Paul Luggy had just finished playing, but he was a brilliant coach. Sturrock was a brilliant coach, great working with attacking players. Big size Stevie Neri was just the most laid-back man in the world. He looked like he could play till he was 50. He never positionally brilliant. Paul Hegarty was just coming possibly at the end, and I think he left to St Johnstone first of all. But again, great guys, and who had spent who'd spent their whole career at Tannadice, you know, and had so you were walking into a dressing room that was. It was quite a different combination. You had all those guys, you know, your Jim McLean's, your Dave Bowmans, who'd been in United a long time, that had success, they're part of a successful team, and then you had this other, you know, they used to call themselves the new breed of players. I still have that. And then you had the likes of myself who'd been transferred into the club. I was kind of neither. Darren Jackson was a little bit the same, but it was good. They were very much like the example to follow. But the thing was that the younger players who came in, they didn't envisage that they were going to spend their whole career at Dundee United. They wanted to experience other things, and often that's when the problems happened.
How quickly did you realise that Jim McLean was an angry, angry man?
Well, I kind of knew from obviously the past dealings when I said I didn't sign the first time, and obviously what I'd been told. It's like anything, I never envisaged it would be as bad as it actually was. But I think it was my second game. We played in Dundee in the derby, and we were 2-0 up at half time, and I'd scored and played well. And I thought, good. I scored in my debut as well, so I thought this is going well. And we actually lost the game 4-3. Keith Wright scored a hat-trick, and he came in after the game and just tore strips off me. And I was like, it was only I'd only been at the club 4 days. I'd moved, so I was pretty like, is this how it's going to be, you know? And the lads said, look, don't worry about it. That's how it'll be every week. And it just was. That was Jim's way of, you know, I suppose, his frustrations of his dealing with it. And it was a shame in a way, because I think that the one thing possibly missing from Jim McLean, well, it was missing, was the ability of that man management side of things, because he had so much else to offer. His knowledge of the game was brilliant. You don't go and, you know, Jock Stein doesn't ask you to be his assistant at the national team level unless you've got something to offer, and Jim McLean had, his knowledge of the game was fabulous. Unfortunately, how he tried to pass that knowledge on to players at times was difficult.
Would older guys like Neri in that city, listen, forget that?
Yeah, they would. Yeah, they'd all been through it. They'd all been through it, you know, and they'd all had it at different times. As they got older, it got less and less. New players come into the team, new players then tended to be the brunt of it. But you pretty much come in at half time thinking, hopefully he'll start in someone else before me, because by the end of the half time, there might not be enough time for him to get round, you know. Or you tried to make sure you didn't sit beside someone that was going to get it. You know, I used to always think, it used to be particularly hard sometimes on Paddy Conley. So I always used to come in and think, I'll sit away from Paddy because he might get it. But that was the way, you know. And in those days as well, you know, there was only 2 subs, there was only 13 people in the dressing room actually. So some of the half-time scenes could be fairly interesting.
Would anyone ever give a bit back?
1 or 2, like, there was always 1 or 2, and then that was the one thing that came in, like, when Duncan Ferguson came in, and then he came into the team, he almost became kind of untouchable, because he certainly had this value. He had like 10 years left on his contract, but he had a value of
on a £5 a week.
Yeah, and yeah, it's all, but he had, I think he knew, I'll get out here. He doesn't have the same hold, and I think that was the start of the end nearly for Jim, because I played in Jim McLean's last game before he resigned, and you know, that was Duncan Ferguson's last season as well. And I think he saw that this generation of players aren't going to be managed the same way that I managed the previous generation of players. And so yeah, there's 1 or 2 that spoke back. I remember we had an Argentinian there, Victor Ferreira. And Victor spoke back in like Argentinian or Spanish, like, and it was quite funny at times. But the thing was that if you spoke back, invariably you found yourself out of the team for about 6 weeks or 6 months on some occasions. So that was where always you were slightly wary about what you would say.
It's funny you said that, because we interviewed Andy McLaren, and he said that Duncan Ferguson was the end for Jim McLean. So he couldn't handle. What was it? Just the confidence that Big Dunk had?
There was a bit of that. There was certainly the confidence in that. But I think that Dunk had got to a point where he just didn't care. He sort of went, look, I'm not going to be here for 11 years. You know, my contract might say that you can hold me at that time. And I think he just thought, like, you know, any of the control that Jim McLean had over him had gone very quickly, because Fergie had come, made an immediate impact into the team. You know, he was this 20-year-old kid, 6'4". He was what every team in Britain was looking for, you know. Rangers 4 minutes. When you have none of us had that value. We had values at the time. I remember Ray McKinnon went to Nottingham Forest for $750,000, which was a lot. Jim was brilliant at cashing in at the right time. He sold Kevin Gallagher for 900 grand, which was just, at the time, £1 million was a lot of players. But Dunk's value was like way and above that. So once you had that valuation, then I suppose the balance of power maybe rested more with Fergie than it did with Jim McLean.
Big Dunk loves his pigeons. Did he not try to put a pigeon hut in your house?
He did try, yeah. He did. The young lads at Dundee United, they were all in digs, so they weren't. It was pretty basic conditions that they lived in. I had a house, and I was quite fortunate because when I came to Dundee United, I think they paid just 350 grand for me at the time, which was a club record. So my contract was a bit different. I was financially better off than the other young players. So I was able to buy a house and stuff. So they used to come down to the house, and Big Fergie had, I think he had a plot out the back where he could, a ducat. I'd never heard of what a ducat was. I didn't know what that was. So he explained to me what a ducat was, and could he put a pigeon hut there, which I refused. And then he asked me, could I keep a greyhound at one point as well? So, again, which I refused. So yeah, but it was good times actually, and I haven't seen him for a long while, but it's good to see him still in the game actually. It's good to see him, back in the coaching side of Everton.
Just the last wee bit on Jim McLean. Could you never go to him after it and say, listen, I think you've been a bit harsh on me, can we have a wee chat about it? Would that just not exist back then?
There was times you had that. There was times where sometimes he would do something that was like quite compassionate, and you would think, you'd start to think differently, or when he praised you, it meant so much. But invariably then it would turn very quickly, and, unfortunately, I always felt that Jim McLean, that was he had so much to give a player, he had so much brilliant information to give you as a player, but because of how it was delivered to you, you never received it. You never took it in and received it as you should have done, because there were some real moments of genius in there. There were some really, like he could say the smallest thing to you about your game, and you go away and think, that's going to make me, that's 100% right, that's going to make me better. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, if that one thing or that piece of information, is yelled into your face from, 5 centimetres away from your face, you're not gonna, take it and process it. And that was I think the difficulty of it. But it was funny when I left United. I don't think I had a conversation with Jim McLean, or I haven't had a conversation since that point in time.
See, when he was doing that stuff, do you think he was doing that because he thought it would make you a better player, or was it just him getting his anger at it?
It was more, no, it was just the frustration of the game. Mm-hmm. The frustration of the game. He was much better. When I went to United, he was banned from the touchline, so he was in the glass box. At Tannadice, the glass box. So he was in, and you could see him go mad in the box when you were playing. So you were always hoping you were on the other side of the pitch. But then when the ban finished, I always remembered, the ban finished, he used to still sit in the box, but there was like a fire escape out the side of the box, so then he could get out onto the sideline, and you'd just see him get up, and you'd know, he's coming out, and he's coming out to skip at the fire escape, and then he would just berate you from the side of the touchline. It was just his way. I just think he got so engrossed in the game, and he was so, I think you had a man that would 24/7, his mind was just football all the time. And as I say, it was 4 years, and I think possibly when I look at all the managers I played under, all of the environments I was in at different clubs that I played at, I always think probably I took more from Tannadice in terms of what I've taken to be a manager than maybe any of the other clubs I was at.
I was going to say that, as a player, is there times that you look back and when you were a player you think he's out of order there, but now you're a manager, you can see where he was coming from?
Yeah, I think all players do. I think all players change when they go and do their coaching badges, and they go, I should have been more receptive as a player. That's the biggest thing. And when I look back as a player, I think I should have been more receptive at times. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't have very many of the answers, if the truth be told. So that's where I think possibly, getting young players into coaching at a young age is not a bad thing. You know what I mean? Because they see how difficult it is, and the benefit of coaching as well. But I think that that's probably where I looked at all the different managers that I played on, and I took good and bad from them all. You know, things that they were exceptionally good at. You know, I looked at, you know, Gordon Strachan when I went to Coventry. His enthusiasm on the training pitch was brilliant, infectious. You loved it. Even when you were at the team at Coventry, you went in every day and felt you were learning. Alec Miller, extremely well organised. You know, again, had a bit of Jim McLean about him, but brilliant on the opposition. You know, Jim McLean, brilliant tactically. You know, very hard on you, high standards. And I think you take bits from all of them. And the best managers I played under, without any doubt, were the Scottish managers.
You said 4 years at United. Was it a bit of relief to get it out at the end?
It wasn't the end. You know, I had a difficult last year. I remember initially when I went to United, I signed a 3-year contract. And in my last year, I started the season and scored 5 goals in 6 games. And then Jim McLean never played me the rest of the season. He never played me a single game, a single minute, because my contract, and he wanted me to sign a contract, and I had sort of said, look, I'm going back to England, and I want to go back to England. And then he basically put me out of the game, to be honest, for that period of time. And then it was different then. There was no Bosman. You know, there was no Bosman, so United held my registration. I went to Everton on trial. I went to Middlesbrough. Couldn't agree a deal, and English clubs didn't like going to the tribunal system with Scottish teams at the time either. So I actually ironically went back to Dundee United, signed a contract from October to the end of the season, and he played me every game. It was no different from the year before. My contractual situation was no different, but he played me basically every game. And then he retired, and Ivan Golak came in, and that was kind of my opportunity, I thought, to get away. And Hibs came in and bought me in a tribunal for, I think, about 250 or something like that.
So no-brainer to go to Hibs?
Ideally, if I've been honest, at the time, my preference was to try to go back to England. It was the start, you know, the Premier League had just started actually, and it was, you know, you could see things, you know, the game in England where it was developing. But Hibs was great. I loved Hibs as a club. Alec was a really good manager. Listen, we had a bit of a love-hate relationship at times, but he was a very, very good manager. And you know, Hibs is a really good club to play for. And you know, I live in Edinburgh now. You know, I regard it as my home city. And you know, Hibs is a club that, you know, when I look back, it was 3 very happy years I had there.
How much did you enjoy your time there?
Brilliant. It was, you know, as I say, we had a good team, and it wasn't a young team, but we had a good, you know. I played off the left. We signed Kevin McAllister, played off the right. Keith Wright and Darren Jackson played up front. Jim Leighton in goal. You know, Alec was always criticised for being a little bit negative, but I never found him that way at all. You know, he was structured but not negative. And you know, it makes me laugh now a little bit where everyone, the media and managers and coaches, they talk about the top 6. You have to be in the top 6. The 3 years I was at Hibs, we finished 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and like Alec Miller was maligned for a lot of that. You know, so we were beaten in the cup final by Rangers. So it was a good time. You know, I remember one season, we think it was my 2nd season, Rangers won the league. Motherwell pipped us to 2nd, we were 3rd, and Celtic were 4th. So that, you know, those are situations that you wouldn't even envisage happening in Scottish football now. But it was good. Hibs is a good place to play. Easter Road's a good place to play, and the Hibs fans are great.
You mentioned Darren Jackson. I think that was Newcastle United and Hibs. How good a pal is he with you?
Our careers are intertwined, to be honest. Normally, I followed him about a year later. That's kind of the way it happened.
Is that a good or a bad thing?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, he had no other mates maybe in the dressing room, but yeah, it was good. Darren's like anyone that's been in the dressing room, and Darren knows he's a good lad. He's lively, he's bubbly, a good player as well. Really good player, great finisher. But he'd been through that. You know, he had seen me come. His pathway wasn't that different to mine because he'd gone from Meadowbank at the time to Newcastle, which was a bit similar to me going from Korean to Newcastle. So he was good for me when I went to Newcastle. He looked out for me a bit. You know, he was different. He was married at 20, and you know, his lifestyle and things were different. But he was a very good player. His enthusiasm for the game is still there. I see him jumping about in the touchline, so I'm looking forward to seeing him back in the technical area now at St Mirren and causing havoc.
So how did Coventry come about and Gordon Strachan? Was it him that wanted to sign you?
Yeah, it was really. You know, Gordon had. I knew there was interest. There was interest. It was a funny time that, because it was the first year of Bosman, but you weren't a Bosman in Scotland to go to England. You were only a Bosman to go to
country to country.
Yeah, to France or somewhere like that. And John Collins had actually gone to Monaco from Celtic, and you know, people were telling me, oh, Celtic will come in, but Celtic would have had to buy me. And then I actually spoke to Sturm Graz in Austria, and I was going to go there. and Hibs were holding out, and Hibs were, you know, and then eventually Gordon came in, and you know, I think they bought me for 400 or 500 grand. But Ron Atkinson was the manager, and then Gordon was the assistant manager, with the basically that Gordon would take over in 12 to 18 months. It happened after about 3 months, to be honest. So it was really good to go to the Premier League. Was brilliant, but unfortunately for me, it was a bit of a disaster for me. I started in the team, and then I was out of the team, and then I had an injury. And basically, when I look back at Coventry, you know, I was 2 years at Coventry, and for a period I spent 6 months away on loan, and for the other 18 months, about 12 of those I was injured. I had three groin surgeries and a shoulder surgery as well. So it was disappointing. It's the one period in my career where I look back and think there were real disappointment, because it was my chance to go back to be in the Premier League. You know, could I play at that level? Could I establish myself at that level? And I always feel that I possibly didn't get the chance. And you know, as I say, you know, you just have to deal with that and move on. But I really enjoyed working under Gordon Strachan. I thought he was a brilliant coach and infectious. You know, even at the time I was 27. You know, I always felt that he was making me a better player.
Guys we've had on have told some great stories about his wit. Did you see that at any time?
Oh yeah, he could cut you in two in the training pitch. The problem we had with Gordon was he was still the best player at the club. That was, you know, and he actually played for a period, and he made such a difference to the team. You know, he used to play in reserve games, and sometimes you'd play, you'd never work as hard in your life, because Strat could still work. He still got up and down the pitch. His standards were so high. You tried to avoid being on his team in training, because like if he got beat, you know, you hated getting beat, and then you'd be running and stuff. He just
what you did? What you did? What you doing that for?
Totally. And then he had players that he would just never pick. He used to go on, I'm not picking him, play with good. He would pick his team, the players he wanted. But it was very infectious. I remember once we said, a young boy kept giving the ball, an Irish boy actually kept giving the ball in training. He just says, listen, you need to go in. He says, you're ruining the training. So he had to send him in. Barry Quinn, always remember it. But Gordon was really, really good to work, you know. And again, when I worked with Gordon, I think he would have been, let's say he was 39, 40 and still playing. When you're a player, when the manager can come in and do the demo, and it's better than anyone else. The only player, technically, possibly, who was Gary McAllister. You know, he could come in and do it, and Strachan could come in and do it, and the rest of us were like, we're maybe not going to be able to do that. So,
how good was McAllister as a player?
Very good, very good. It was a surprise move for Gary. I always felt he signed just after me, because he came from Leeds. They'd just won the league a few years previous. So I always felt like he was Scotland captain. That it was a surprise. It was after just Euro '96 actually that he came, and but you know, I think what Gary did at the tail end of his career outlined how good a player he was. What he did at Liverpool from the ages of sort of 32, 33 to 36, 37 was phenomenal. In Coventry, he was always playing a struggling team. You know, we always tended to be fighting for our lives a little bit at Coventry, and that was the nature of the Premier League. And so possibly, we didn't see the best of him at Coventry, but certainly, he showed that at Liverpool.
Is that tough for an attacking player like yourself when you're fighting relegation all the time?
Very difficult. It was one of the things as well that possibly, Gordon used to say to me at times, look, he says, I need to put running power in the team. And we had players at the club, like people like, Noel Whelan that came up here, like Paul Telford. They were brilliant. They could cover huge distances in the game. They were very good players as well. And that was, when you're at the bottom of the league, you had to be like that. You needed that in your team. And, I suffered a little bit because of that. Owen Jess suffered, Ian Jess didn't play. He was there at the time as much either as maybe what he wanted. And it gave me, I think it was the start of the Premier League where the pace and the power that we'll always talk about players now in Scotland going, south and how different it is, how they have to adapt to the pace and the power of the game down there. I think that was the start of it, and that gap starting to grow, and then the influx of the foreign players that come in. I think at the time, at Coventry, we possibly had 8, 9 different nationalities in the dressing room as well. So very, very competitive environment.
You think maybe that move abroad to Stimgrass would have maybe suited your style of play better?
It's one thing when I look back, that I wish I'd possibly have done. It's the one thing I think I would have liked to have gone and played abroad, experienced that. you know, you see players, I think possibly playing abroad that, you know, would have suited me. I always looked at, you know, how, you know, John Collins did fantastically well at Monaco. And I think, you know, when he came back to the Premier League, it was first with Everton and then with Fulham, you know, I'm sure he found it difficult to adapt, because I'm sure, like, Monaco and that style of football was more suitable to his kind of game as well.
Okay, mate, on to the managerial career. The most obscure first manager's job ever, Brechin City.
Brechin City,
How did that come about?
Bizarre situation, really. I had gone, I'd not walked away, I'd stopped playing, and I'd done my coaching badges, but I'd done nothing with them. I actually was working in financial services, and I was working at Ernst & Young in Edinburgh. And I just remember, one Saturday I was shopping with my wife, and I just went, I'm not meant to be shopping on a Saturday. Like, just something hit me, and I went, she said, well, you better go and do something about it. So I phoned Mixu Patalainen, who was the Cowdenbeath manager. I said, he had no assistant. Mixu didn't have an assistant. I said, do you need help? And we'd known Mixu from United. He says, you come in? Yeah, I can't pay you. And I said, no, I want to come in and start. So I went to Cowdenbeath and started working with Mixu. And then my mate Grant Johnson was at Dundee, Brechin at the time, who'd been at Dundee United with me, and it was Dick Campbell had left Brechin. I think Dick had left, and then Ian Campbell had left, and it was him. He said, why don't you go for the job? And I was like, no. And he says, go on, I'll throw your name in at the directors. And they indicated that they didn't like to interview me, and I went and interviewed, and then they gave me the job. So suddenly I was managing a club 90 miles from where I lived, trying to do a full-time job. And I think my daughter at the time was two or three at the time, so I took on a lot at that time, but it wasn't a plan. It was just something instinctive, and brilliant. I love Brechin. It's a great club.
You can take that job, but you need to cut that hedge.
You need to cut the hedge, and you need to deal with it. But it was a brilliant, you know, I look at young managers now, and you can't be choosy. You know, if you're offered a manager job, you know, if you want to be a manager and you're offered a manager job, you have to take it. But I was fortunate that I went to a club where there was really good people that were going to give me a chance to be a manager. And they're still good people. You look at the fact, you know, Brechin go to the championship. Okay, they don't manage to win a game, but they haven't sacked the manager. They realise where they are as a club. My job was to try and, you know, they were in a similar situation. They'd been relegated from the championship. I was basically trying to restructure and get the team younger and make it competitive. And it is the best grounding, I think, for any, I would say to any young manager, you know, everyone wants to start as high as they can, but if you don't get that opportunity, you know, go and get your hands dirty. And, you know, in those 2-3 seasons at Brechin, arguably I learned as much as I've learned anywhere.
That's what I was going to say, Giant, working in the lower leagues helped you as a manager.
Totally.
I mean, working under no resources, how hard was that?
Totally. It's, you know, people, you know, you have to sit down, you have to do all the same things. You've got to leave players at the team. You know, I had lads coming into me on 200 quid a week, and I was encouraging them to take £50 wage drop. They were like that. So that £50 meant a lot to them. But I need it. I needed £650 off them all to get myself 2 new players.
Yeah, right,
so I had to manage budgets. I had to.
How did you even go about finding players?
Word of mouth at that, because you don't have recruitment. It was word of mouth. Like, I remember one of the things I did do, I signed Paddy Connolly, who had been playing for the previous 2 years at Stirling, and Paddy knew every player in the lower. He knew everyone, so he was invaluable to me. I brought Gareth Evans as my assistant, who had previously worked at Alloa, so knew a lot of the players. I didn't know the players, really. I knew that short spell at Cowdenbeath, I started to get to know the players, but I didn't know a lot of the players that were playing in the lower divisions. But quickly you do, and a lot of it's logistics as well. Like we based the club in Edinburgh. We kind of trained in Edinburgh and we trained in Perth, which meant we could only sign really players from the central area. We couldn't really sign players from Aberdeen or anywhere like that. So, you know, we focused on that, and you know, it was good. You know, when I left Brechin, you know, we made the playoffs. I think the 2 years I was there, and when I left, I think we were top or joint top with Raith Rovers at the time. One of the challenges we always had, which was a good challenge, there was always 1 or 2 full-time teams in the league. Ross County ran it at one time, Raith Rovers, Morton. You know, so those were all good challenges, and but it's I would honestly, for any young manager, and I look at young managers now, I look at people like, you know, Paul Hartley, where he started, you know, other managers that have gone to that level. Like Mixu Patalainen started at Cowdenbeath, and I went as an assistant, and I think it was 6 years later we were playing against each other in a World Cup game for Finland and Northern Ireland.
Brilliant.
So, that shows you where you can go to in a short space of time.
You still get some great players in the lower leagues, mate. Believe me.
So believe.
See, when that is your first...
There's a few hard luck stories, isn't
there? Believe me. I've told that story hundreds of times. See, when you're going into your first job, is it about a style of players that just winning to get another move?
I genuinely don't believe that you can coach players. First of all, part-time players don't really want to be coached. Do you want to?
No, you want to kick a bit, don't you?
You want to come on a Tuesday and a Thursday night. Some of them, you're different because you don't have a job. Some of them have jobs, right? So they're working harder than you. But if you've been working 9 to 5, you don't want to come and necessarily be coached. There's an element of how you set your training up, which has a coaching aspect to it. But you're not wanting to go. It's not about you as the coach. It's about creating the right environment for the players, getting them together. We had a really good group at Brechin. They were good lads. They worked hard. We knew what we were good at. We were very hard to beat, particularly at Glebe. The pitch was tight, good at set pieces. And, if you bring those lads together, they enjoy training Tuesday and Thursday. They're ready to play Saturday. I put a really strict wage structure at Brechin where everyone was on the same appearance money, the same bonus money. So when they were successful, they were turning up, and I think, their appearance and their bonus could be worth an extra £150 to them. So they were incentivised, they got the wages. If they walked away on a Saturday and they'd won the game, sometimes they had £300 a week. They were made up, they couldn't wait to get back to training Tuesday night. That's what you create, really, as opposed to, let's play systems and let's work. And you don't have the time and you don't have the facilities to do it. You're working more with the players mentally.
How delighted were you when Shamrock Rovers came calling?
Well, it was a big decision to make, to be honest. I remember I was linked to go take the Dundee job, and Dundee at the time actually had asked Brechin for permission to speak to me, and Brechin had turned it down. And at that time I was working for a company in Edinburgh, a different financial service company, and we were going out of business. So that was a factor.
Was that down to you?
Yeah, no, it wasn't down to me, down to the others in the company. And that was a factor. I was thinking, well, I didn't really think I would take the Shamrock Rovers job when I first met them. And then I went over to Dublin, and I thought, I had a feeling there's something here, you could do something with this. And then, came back, and then they came and they offered me, a good contract to go to. First of all, it's full-time football. And I thought, because of my situation with my job, I'm always going to have to make this decision at some point in time. And I thought this was the right time to do it. But I went into, it was a huge challenge, because I went into a league that I had the biggest club and the club with the most history, but budget-wise and where the team was really not in a good place at all. So the challenge to get to where we got to was massive. And but again, a lot of the principles that I put in place at Brechin, I brought it to Shamrock Rovers as well.
Is it harder being a manager at a team with higher expectations?
Yeah, it is, but that's what you want. I always say that to our players. There's nothing worse. The worst thing you can be as a footballer or as any sportsman is to have no expectation. Imagine going out and it can't be that. And we got to a point with Northern Ireland where I felt that we need to change. We need to create expectation here. And we've done that. And we play friendly games now in Belfast and they sell out. Beforehand, you would have played a friendly game in Belfast, you couldn't have given the tickets away. So you need to create expectation as well. It's a good thing. It keeps players motivated. It keeps people on their toes. It keeps me motivated. It keeps me constantly wanting to drive the thing forward. So with Shamrock Rovers, the big thing was, could we take this club back to where they felt they belonged? The top club in Ireland, and thankfully, we managed to do that.
And what was that down to? 'Cause you said it needed a lot of work when you first went in. What clicked to put it into place?
First, I had to I used my financial skills and chopped the budget in very many ways. Got rid of all the dead wood very quickly. Had to make quick decisions. I thought, I'm not going to carry these players for 6 months. So basically, within about 6 weeks, I went to the board and I said, look, I need 60,000 to pay these players off. But I was also creating another 200,000 in my budget by doing that. I felt I could get players in Scotland that were cheaper than the players in Ireland at the time. The players in Ireland were expensive because it was off the back of the Celtic Tiger, and players in the League of Ireland were earning £2,000 a week, €2,000, €1,800, where I was bringing players in from Scotland on €500 a week. I brought Craig Sivis in from Hearts, and he'd been injured. And he came in initially on €250 a week, and by the end, he was the best centre half in the league. People were going, what a player this lad is. We got him fit. We brought Gary Twigg in, who scored 60-odd goals for us in 4 seasons. We brought Greg Cameron come over on loan from Dundee United. Ross Chisholm come over. So I brought a nice little influx of players, some from north of the border, some from Scotland, and built a cheaper team that was competitive.
How important is it to be ruthless with, like you say, you had to get rid of the deadwood?
It'd have to be. It's the most important. It's the biggest difference between a coach and a manager. A manager makes decisions. A good manager makes decisions. You must make decisions and trust your instinct in the decision. Otherwise, all the other stuff on the pitch is great, all that other stuff, but you have to have I think, a pathway. This is where I'm going, and these are the decisions I'm going to have to make. And they're not all easy. They're not all easy. I've had to do that at international as well. I had to basically, end David Healy's international career, even though he was the record goal scorer for Northern Ireland. So you have to make those decisions, or you'll die. And that, I think, is the biggest thing I would say as well in terms of management. Get to the point. The sooner you're in a position where you're making decisions, the better you'll get at it. If you spend 15 years coaching, you're not overly making decisions. You're just deciding what training you're putting on the pitch. It's different from the decisions you make as a manager or personal between you and the player. It's a different relationship.
Did you always have that ruthlessness? Or do you think maybe the financial work brought that out of you?
Yeah, I think it possibly did. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't have said, I would have said going into management that would have been something that I would have been wary of. I'm not sure if I'm strong enough to make these decisions. Will I be able to go into that environment and make those decisions? But once I got in, I just I think it happens, you have, in the early part of management, you get situations that crop up and you have to decide. It's easier to make that decision, but that's really the right decision. But that's a tough decision to make. And once you make that decision, you'll know you can make it again. If you make that one, then you might make the next one, and suddenly you're not true to yourself. So if you believe the decision is the right decision to make, no matter how tough it is, then you just have to be brave enough to do it.
Brilliant. You defeated Partizan Belgrade in 2011 to get to the Europa group stages. Is that when you began to think, what a team I've got here?
Well, no, first of all, with Rovers, we did, we finished the first season, when I took over Rovers, they finished 42 points behind Bohemian. Pat Fenlon was the manager at Bohemians. They had a really strong team, won the league. And the next season, my first season, we finished 4 points behind, and we just missed out. We lost the league in the last 3 games. And then our team started to get stronger again. The second season, we won the league. We got through. Juventus beat us in the Europa League as well. Wow. So we got a bit more experience. We started to get experience, a little bit European experience. We'd beaten an Israeli team. We won in Israel to get through. And then we came into the Champions League. We won the first round of that. Copenhagen beat us. And then we dropped into the playoff for the Europa League to play Partizan. And we were equipped to deal with it. In all of the European games, even though we'd gone out at times, the aggregate score might have been 2-1 or 3-1. We weren't getting beat 4-0 and 3-0, and we were always able to compete. And it was a brilliant night because it was the first time that a club from Ireland, north or south of the border, had got to that stage. Partizan had been a team that had been in the Champions League the previous season, and an incredibly hostile place to play. But to win the game, as we did, and to win it, in extra time and that, and it was brilliant, And suddenly then, as a coach, I was developing, even subconsciously as a coach, how do I prepare my team tactically? Because I had the best team in the league, domestically, so I didn't overly have to prepare my team tactically. I knew if we went and we played well, we would win. More often than not,
because you had better players.
Yes. Whereas now I was going in to play against Partizan Belgrade, Juventus. We played Rubin Kazan, we played Tottenham, we played PAOK. So suddenly within the space of about 18 months, I think I'd played something like 14 European ties. And that experience of how to set up a team, how to think about a team, I think that possibly was, the one thing that, was in my favour when eventually, the IFA came to speak to me about the international job.
Was there other interest in you then, or was it only Northern Ireland?
No, I thought at one point I thought I was going to be the next Hibs manager, and it didn't happen. I did speak to Hibs, and they opted to go down a different route. There was talk about Dundee United at that time as well. I thought, from a career point of view, my next step would be to come and manage in the SPL at the time. That was, I still had my house in Edinburgh. Scottish football, I knew I wanted to come back to. There was a bit of talk about, League One. Even Preston was mentioned as a possible option as well. I was out of contract at Shamrock Rovers at the time, and I didn't think I would get the national job. There was people who had managed in the Premier League, there was people who had managed in the Championship, who were in for that job as well. And I was only 42 at the time, so I was young to be an international manager. I think at the time I was the third youngest in Europe, so I didn't envisage that I would be the Northern. There was no career plan there. That wasn't part of it. It just happened. And when I went for the interview, they came and offered me the job, and then I thought, well, if I don't take it now, I might never get it. You never know. You might never get offered it again. So I took it, and 6 years later, I'm still in it.
What were the objectives at the start when you first took the job?
Just to try and win, to be honest. It was like I didn't possibly realise Northern Ireland had finished badly in the previous Euro 2012 campaign. Had finished badly, 4 straight defeats, and you could tell that there was a lot of. It wasn't a happy camp. It wasn't.
Due to what?
I just think results had been bad. You could tell Nigel Worthington was getting disillusioned with the job as well a little bit, and it was difficult for him. I didn't realise. I think Northern Ireland in the previous they'd won something like 2 of 22 games. I didn't realise it was that bad. Now there was draws in there and that as well. So when I came into the job, like the first objective, just make it better. People just wanted, can we make it better? And we actually did. Performance-wise, we did make it better. The only thing was our results had let us down. We played a lot better, but we were a team that almost had it was like a self-harming complex. We would play well in the game for 70 minutes and lose 1-0, off a deflected goal, or we would be leading 1-0 and then we'd lose a game 2-1 in the last 10 minutes. We almost became accustomed to, losing games from winning positions, and so that was the very difficult first 2 years for me. It took me 10 games to win, but in that period, we drew with Portugal away and almost won. We drew at home with Luxembourg and Azerbaijan, which were 2 really bad results that we should have won comfortably. We beat Russia. Capello was the manager. We had high points, but we had some low points in there as well. The friendlies were difficult because player availability wasn't strong. But then, there was a lot. That 2-year period there was a transition in the squad. There was a bit of weeding out to be done of certain players. There was a lot of refocusing for players. Say, look, we need to change what we're doing here. And thankfully, as I say, we managed to do that for Euro 2016.
So was it mentality that you changed?
Biggest thing, yeah. Biggest thing. Yeah, it wasn't. We didn't have. People always go, like, if I had been a club manager with the same group of players, I would have changed the players. Because you'd have gone, I've given them enough chances, but I didn't have any other players. I couldn't do that.
How tough is that?
It's very tough. It's very tough. One of the hardest things people don't know is about an international manager. And I'd speak to Gordon about this when he was in the Scotland job as well, and he even, I remember speaking to Craig about it. And like, you're on your own so much. You don't have a staff. You don't go into the club and sit around the table after training and have a cup of tea and talk about things. You don't have that. Your staff are all working at clubs. Scotland's the same. Gordon's staff are working at clubs, and they're focused. They just come in and work with the national team when you're together. But the manager's constantly working. But you're constantly, things in your head, you're constantly on your own, and you just have to deal with so much in terms of how do you change it. Like how will you change it? How can we make it better? And slowly but surely, we had to go through that campaign where, as I said, like we sat with the players and we went, there's our results at 90 minutes, and we had 7 points from 10 games. I said, but there's our results at 70 minutes in the 10 games. I said, we had 16 points. We'd have been third in the group. We finished fifth. I said, so we're not as far away as what people think. We've let ourselves down. Our discipline was poor. We'd suspensions, and we couldn't afford to have that. So we drilled into everything. We looked at all aspects of it, all the statistics around the games that we played in competitively, and just tried to create a message that we could bring to the players that say, listen, we can do better here. And the big thing, I think, for a lot of it was the first year for the Euros that the third place team could qualify, or at least get a playoff. So we had to show them, even in the previous campaign, that they should have finished third, to give them that belief. And they took it on board. And, we started out trying to finish third, and then we ended up, we won our group. So, they overachieved in that situation. But to be fair to the squad, they've kept it going. Okay, we narrowly missed out in the World Cup, and then slowly we integrated new players into the squad, and players that, Josh McGuinness was a player that people thought, well, like, what is Josh? Is he a right back? He was a goalkeeper at one point. Is he a striker? But Josh grew with us. He grew with us. He's now a championship player at Bolton, and he's played in a major tournament. He scored an important goal for us. He scored against the world champions. People at the time thought Josh McGuinness was a bit of a laughing stock. But look how his career's gone as well. And that's, you know, we got players that grew with the squad as well. That was very important.
Is it similar to club managing where you need to get the main players on side, the older, experienced players on side quickly?
You need that. You need that, and thankfully I had that. I had that pretty much from the outset. You had to convince, you know, Davis. You know, I brought Aaron Hughes back. He was in retirement. Chris Baird, Chris Brunt, Johnny Evans, Macaulay, big players like Premier League players, like, and you know, convincing them, like, you know, do you want to look back in your international career and have 70 caps but not too many highlights? You know, we have to create highlights. We have to create memories. And you know, it was doing that. It was getting them to that point where they valued their international career again. It was something that became important to them again, and it's something that's become important to them now. So they all have little targets in their head. Johnny Evans is, you know, I want 100 caps. You know, previously Johnny maybe would have ducked out of a tour or wouldn't have been available. Now, you know, he's there in the summer for us playing in Costa Rica and Panama. The focus of the senior players was important, because if you don't have that, it's very difficult to drill it into the players that are beneath them.
When was it that you started? Was there a specific moment that you started to think this squad can do something?
Yeah, probably when we won the first game in Euros. We didn't. We couldn't play. Everyone always talks about the games, and I know it came up a lot when obviously there was the Scotland interest in me, and they talk about winning percentages, and you know, oh, he didn't win. He only won 1 in 10 games. And then I had a period as an international manager where I had to play 10 international games away from home, because our stadium was being redeveloped.
Right,
So we were going and playing away in Turkey, away in Cyprus, away in Chile, away in Uruguay. Well, you're not going to go there and win. Tough, you know, you're going there, tough places to go and play against teams that were going to the World Cup or whatever. So, but it was a huge challenge, and we grew as a team, even though we weren't getting results. We grew as a team. It affected all those stats, percentages, and everything. But you know, when people drilled down closer, you know, I mean, I think like in competitive games, even with the first campaign, you know, I think my win percentage is something around about 50 or 60%, which is high for a country like Northern Ireland. But when we won that game in Hungary, we played well in Hungary. It shows you the fine margins. Gareth Macaulay got injured, and we had to take him off in the 70th minute, and they scored in the 72nd minute off a corner. And you think, here we go again. It was following the same pattern. We've played well for 70 minutes plus, and we came back and we won the game 2-1. Niall McGinn scored the winner. Niall McGinn scored the equaliser and set up the winner for Kyle. Kyle had set up Niall's goal as well, and we won that game. So that was the start of the campaign. But in the past, our next game was the Faroe Islands, and in the past, Northern Ireland would then come home and draw that game 0-0 or something. We came back, we won that game 2-0, and then we went to Greece and we won 2-0 away. So suddenly we had won our first 3 games, and the mindset of the players, the belief, everything changed really in those 3 games. And to be fair, it's been there ever since.
How good is the team spirit with that group? I mean, Kyle Lafferty, is he a funny guy?
Good. Listen, you need all those types of players. You need them. And like, players come and get disappointed as well. You know, you do disappoint players. They come, like I've had lads that have come to Euros, they've not played. You know, like lads like Will Grigg that came, and there was all this interest in Will Grigg. We never put him on the pitch. So there's a lot of dealing with players. The man management side of international football is very important. But when you have a good group of players, and possibly it's easier for us to do that because we're not consistently changing our squad. Our options aren't as big as certainly as Scotland's or England's or other countries. So we're not constantly changing our players. There's a consistency to our squad. It means the relationships are high and their spirit's extremely high. And
you eventually qualify. How good a feeling is that? Do you feel like the whole country is in debt to you?
Well, not. It was incredible, really, because we played. We had a great start. You know, we had 12 points from 5 games, 4 wins, 1 defeat away in Romania, who were really the number 1 seed in the group. Or Greece were the number 1 seed. Sorry, Romania were the number 2 seed. And then we played away. We drew with Romania at home, and then game 7 we played away in the Faroe Islands. The game was tight. It was 1-1, and then we won the game 3-1. And the way the results went, we were coming back to play Hungary and Belfast, and we knew a win would guarantee us qualification. And so that was an incredible feeling to think we can qualify here in game 8. And the game was very, very tight. And it was a goal. We lost a bad goal. Michael McGovern, he actually dropped the ball off corner. He was knocked, and they scored.
Sounds like Michael.
And you have played with Mike, of course. And then we had a man sent off So you think it's not going to happen for us tonight, and then 93rd minute, big laugh, sticks his foot out, scores a goal. Niall come off the set piece, come off, Niall strikes, goalie saves, laugh puts it in the net. The whole place erupts. So now it didn't qualify us, but it kept Hungary beneath us. And then we had Greece at home. But that was the first time we had to go into the Greece game. First time with 3 players suspended. Three suspensions. It was our first suspension of the campaign. And on the Saturday, Johnny Evans pulls his hamstring playing for West Brom, and you think, this isn't going to happen for us. So we play Greece, we have to win, and we win the game 3-1. Davis scores twice, Josh McGuinness scores a header, first international goal. So it was an incredible night, fabulous. You know, I think the players, they'll certainly never forget that night. What it meant to Northern Ireland, 30 years since they've been at tournament, was brilliant. And the great thing was that the squad took that. Listen, it was a night to remember, trust me, there wasn't. And then we got on a plane and we managed to go out and draw with Finland. That meant we won the group. So we went from, you know, they still had that motivation. First time ever that Northern Ireland have won the group, and the first time in the history of, I think, European and possibly in FIFA and European qualification that the team that's in pot 5 has won the group.
Wow.
So they had that. Those little things were important to the players. Like, so it was magical because that period between October and the tournament is the worst part for an international manager. And because you have no focus. Like I've had it this time because we missed out in the World Cup. So that is the worst time. And the difference in the job when you have the finals to look forward to. I'm so envious of the international managers that go every tournament. Their cycle, because they have that all the time. And the other thing is, you talk about the spirit in a group. When you go to a major tournament, we spent something like 42 days together, living in each other's pockets for 42 days. And that is invaluable. So if you're a team and you get that every second year as a tournament, how can you not get better all the time? And Scotland are missing that at the minute. You know, it's been 20 years. You've not had that experience. You know, and it would have been great for us to get to Russia as well. But that is the things that when you look back, when you can get it to that level, then I think to be successful again is maybe not as difficult.
See, nerves as a manager, how different is it when you're as a nation that's the Greece game I'm talking about compared to club management? On that whole nation's...
Yeah, it's totally different. The expectation, people don't realise that. You know, you do carry that.
Do you get nervous before a game?
Oh, yeah. Well, not nervous. You fear it's the disappointment if you don't make it. It was the disappointment, like, you know, constantly in my head, what if we don't make it here? What if we just fall short? What if we just get so close? And the manager carries all of that. He carries it all because he carries it more than the players. He carries it more. If you go to a cup final as a club and you lose it, everyone's disappointed, right? Everyone, the manager, the players, supports. But when you go to that close to a major tournament, and the players, they eventually go back to their clubs. The staff go back. It's the manager that's left there, and that's the difference, I think, and that's the expectation. I remember, speaking to Gordon about this, and he was obviously feeling, that expectation of, he was desperate to bring Scotland to a major tournament, and he it's that fear of the disappointment if you just don't get there.
But the feeling of doing it is even greater.
Oh, the feeling of doing it, yeah. And the games are so tense. International level, the games are so tense. The margins are so fine. You look at it, to talk about Scotland, that, you look at, kicking the ball away from beating England 2-1, Hampden, Harry Kane scores equal. The margins in international football are so fine, and often, it's often that special player that makes the difference at international level. And, if you don't have them, then you have to find other ways to win.
Just on to the tournament itself, Euro 2016. What were the aims going into that?
Well, I thought we got the toughest group, really. Probably ourselves and the Republic of Ireland both got the toughest group. We came out with Germany, Poland and Ukraine, and we knew that it was going to be tough. We didn't, but again we thought, well, what have we got to lose? I remember certain pundits and people on Sky saying, well, Northern Ireland have done amazing to qualify, but they'll not score a goal. They'll just, they're there to enjoy the tournament. And we lost the first game. We didn't play so well, but Poland were good. Poland were strong. Lewandowski and Krakowiak were brilliant on the day. But we still had to turn the team around, and we beat Ukraine. It was a brilliant performance in Lyon. And then we had a chance. We had a chance of qualification, but we had to play Germany in Paris. But even a defeat gave us a chance because of the way the groups, the third place, possibly could qualify. So we had to just make sure. The one team you don't want to be playing as Germany, because they can beat you 5 or 6, and 5 or 6 would have killed us. Even 3-0 possibly would have put us out. So we were 1-0 down in the game, but we're still trying to get something in the game. So you're trying to change it to give yourself a chance of maybe getting an equaliser, because you might need a point, but equally you're trying not to leave yourself open. And then suddenly you get beat 3-0 and you've missed out in goal average. So it was very difficult. The last 20 minutes of that game was extremely difficult. But we got beat 1-0. Michael McGovern had the goalkeeper's performance that will live long in the memory. It was absolutely amazing in the game. And we obviously got the chance then to go to the knockout stages of the tournament, and where the biggest disappointment was that, because, you know, against Wales, it shows you where we were all sitting together watching the game. Republic of Ireland were playing Italy. And we thought we were going to play France and Lyon. And we were based in Lyon. We wanted that game. The players wanted that game as well. And then Ireland scored with 5 minutes to go. And then suddenly we were going to Paris to play Wales instead. And Ireland were coming to France to play Lyon. And but we played well against Wales. I think Chris Coleman said that, like, arguably it was their hardest game because they had the expectation. And suddenly the mental side of the game was different for them. We didn't. Johnny Evans was brilliant. He didn't give Bale a kick, but the one time in the game, Wales' success was based around Ramsey and Bale. If you could nullify them, and we did it brilliantly. And one time that Ramsey got free, he released Bale, and he puts a great ball in the box, and Gareth McCauley has no option to go for it and turns it into his own net. And that was the only thing between the teams, you know. And we felt we could easily have been in the quarterfinals. You know, it would have been a tough game against Belgium. But, you know, I think we felt there was another game on us, and there was very little between ourselves and Wales on the day.
Just the last wee bit on the fans. The Northern Ireland fans practically took over that tournament.
Yeah.
Were the team aware how good the fans were?
The supporters have been brilliant. You know, the Northern Ireland fans they've lived through, to me, they're very similar. It's similar to Scotland. I come back from, when I always come back to Edinburgh after an international, I see all these guys in kilts and coming back from the Scotland trips, you know, and they're supporting Scotland all over the world. Northern Ireland fans, very much the same. You know, they'll go all sorts of distances, all sorts of means of travel to get there. So to give them the chance to go to a major tournament, because if you think about 30 years, there's a whole generation of Northern Ireland fans that they can't remember 1986 World Cup. Some weren't born, or they were extremely young. So anyone I always said under the age of 35, what do they remember about 1986 World Cup? So that we had a whole generation of fans that this was their first experience of a major tournament, and they fully embraced it. Like, you know, they were brilliant how they were in the games. You know, I remember played Germany after Germany beat us 1-0, and we didn't know if we were in or we were out at that time. And the Northern Ireland fans all stayed behind. They were singing. And like the German fans, I remember Thomas Muller and Bastian Schweinsteiger were out with their phones, like videoing our fans.
Oh, they really?
Yeah, it was brilliant, like to see. They made such an impact in the tournament, and that's why, you know, hopefully, as I say, it's not 30 years before they're back there again.
It must have been surreal for you, though, after that game, thinking your first couple of games, I think he's got battered to where you were now. It must have been a surreal moment.
Oh, totally, yeah. Like, it was.
Did you think you could get there?
Well, when I came in, the first game we played at my debut, or my first game as an international manager, was Norway. We beat 3-0 at home. But it was a bit harsh on us. But the second game we played Holland away, and we played with a very, very young team. We beat 6-0.
6-0,
And I remember I was sitting with Billy McKinley, who was my assistant at the time. We're playing the Amsterdam Arena. It's the biggest clock in the world on the scoreboard. It was 6-0. It's 30 minutes to go. And I'm thinking, this could be 10.
Wee Jim was right.
They were. Wee Jim was right. Yeah, it was. And they were coming at us from everywhere, like Robin, Van Persie, Huntelaar. He had his strongest team. I was playing with a really young team. A lot of our experienced players weren't available. And I'm like, what have I done? What have I got myself into here, really? And at that point, I thought, you know, God, at that time, you don't envisage that you'll ever get to, you know. And the day, you know, I remember we went away at Luxembourg and we got beat after playing really, really well against Portugal. And we got beat in Luxembourg, which was the lowest point. I thought, I'm wasting my time here, really. We're not going anywhere. I couldn't see it. You know, people were still saying, listen, no, forget that, better. And then suddenly, like 2 years later, you're at a major tournament and you're playing. You know, the best thing, you want to go to a tournament, but the games we had were brilliant. Like to play the world champions in Paris and PSG Stadium, like 60,000 people there. That's what the game's about, you know. And those are the memories that we'll take back from it.
You had the highlight of your career so far,
Yeah, to be in a major tournament, to be part of it, and just the whole build up. The real enjoyable bit is the build up. You know, the excitement and everyone. You know, you have difficult things. You have to leave players out of the squad. You know, I had to leave Liam Boyce out of the squad. It was a difficult decision for me. You know, the manager still has a lot to deal with. Everyone else is having a wheel of a time. But as the manager, you're constantly like, we didn't have the staff. I was going back and forward to France, organising training venues, how we would set different things up, the hotel, everything. You know, the Germans have an army of people to do that for the manager. We don't. Like, so I was hands-on. It was a bit like being back at Brechin again.
Can you still enjoy it though?
Yeah, you can. You have to enjoy it. You know, even when like the World Cup playoff was extremely stressful, like, you know, when you're going, you know, we lose the home leg to Switzerland in the final place. Look, we have to enjoy this. Think of all the games you've played as international players. Think of all the times you were sitting there playing game 6, game 7, nothing to play for. Think of all the times you went back to your club and people would have been like, oh, how'd you get on? We beat 1-0 by Latvia, or we drew 0-0 or something. Now you're going back to your club and you've got a chance to go to a major tournament. You've been to a major tournament, different, you know what I mean? And enjoy the expectation that we've created.
You've turned me into a Northern Ireland fan after the interview. I love you, man.
I've checked into your bloodline, and thankfully there's no grandparents there. Yeah.
Just on the future, since we're mates now, you can tell us a wee bit about the Scotland job. Did you fancy it at any stage?
Yeah, of course there was times where it was attractive. You know, there's no doubt about that. And I'm close to Scottish football because I've played in it. I live here. I watch it. So yeah, but you know, I just didn't think for me at that time it was the right thing for me. It was difficult to leave Northern Ireland. And I do think that, you know, it was important for Scotland that a Scotsman managed them as well. You know, I was really disappointed that Gordon just missed out. I'd have loved to see Gordon get the chance because I know I already worked at the job, but it just wasn't to be. And, you know, as I say, hopefully we're not drawn in the same group for the Euros when it comes around in December. But, you know, I haven't seen what Northern Ireland, what qualification has done for Northern Ireland. I know what qualification will do here for Scotland if and when it arrives, you know, and as I say, and possibly, you know, it wasn't the right time for me, but who knows what in the future. Another
affiliation with Scotland, you're now a Peterhead fan, aren't you?
Peterhead fan, yeah. Well, after you would have probably been a player that I would have taken on trial at Brechin and then sent to Peterhead. So we had some good battles. I remember, you know, we had good games with Peterhead and good team. Nice little club up there as well, isn't it? It's a good club. So,
Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Cheers. Thank you.